till date, or how do we understand the essence of events that have led to the post-Cold War? So let us go. Yes, first, let us understand what is superpower. You have to understand the meaning superpower. Superpower, the word itself is coined by William T. Fox. Please remember this name. And it's a part MCQ for if you are writing for the PG set, etc., the common entrances after the PG, after the UG. So, great superpower is coined by William T. Fox, and he explains what is a superpower. He defines superpower is which has the capacity and the strength to intervene and interfere in any part of the world. Okay, not just that, but also this interfering and intervening cannot disturb their public, cannot disturb their citizens at the homeland. Okay, he defined superpower is that. Oh, okay, so we are talking about superpower. So it is. We are talking about superpower, Cold War, and post-war, etc. So the great power so strong that it can be deployed in any strategic place, as opposed to a great power whose interests are confined to a single regional theater. Okay. He explains great power means a power with influences in a regional interference or in a regional space. But whereas superpower is a country, a state where it can intervene and interfere in any part of any region, and also it will be affecting without affecting its own prestige, population, and power. So, what is major power? Also, it is explained when it has all elements of powers, nuclear power, and capacity to maintain balance of power. So, these superpowers are what? Superpowers are just like Superman superpowers. So, the states also just go by the same definition. So, the superpowers can intervene and interfere, and it shall not disturb their power, prestige, and population at homeland. And also, it has the tactical elements of balancing the world with its strategic events, with its elements of power, and with its nuclear power. So, nuclear power as a concept has come into picture after World War II, especially bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, since then, we have to be talking about nuclear power. You cannot ignore or you cannot turn a blind eye to the nuclear power as an super strategic event. So, superpowers can project military, economy, political power all over the world all the time. Not just for a certain period, not just for a few years or certain period of 10 to 5 years, but it has to project it over a longer duration. Okay. The moment it stops producing, or the moment it stops projecting its power, either military wise or political wise or economy wise, it will be turned down its superpower status. So, superpower means there are three definitions that superpower must tick those boxes, then only the state is called a superpower. So, first is it has the capacity to intervene and interfere in the world at any given point of time. And second, this intervening or intervention shall not disturb its power, shall not disturb its population, shall not disturb its prestige at homeland. And third, it has all elements of balancing, it has all elements of power which balances the world in a strategic ways, and also it can project its military, economy, and political influences all over the world and all the time. So superpowers explain if structure. Say this, depending on the number of superpower we see in the world, this can explain that there are different types of polarities in the world. So this we have learned in the previous class yesterday. So world is basically divided into these three polars. One is bipolar, unipolar, and multipolar, where the power division happens between multiple states. So superpowers, the existence of superpower in the world can help you define whether the world is being a unipolar world, or is it being a bipolar world, or with more than two, then it means it's being a multipolar world. The multipolarity is what we see these days with rise of China, with the rise of India in the Eastern Hemisphere, from if speaking from the US perspective. So superpowers does what? It's coined by William T. Fox, and it has a capacity and strength to intervene and affect without affecting its power, prestige, and also maintain balance of power, and also project military, economy, and political power all over the world all the time. Okay, and also it has this interesting feature where it can decide, the superpowers can decide whether a world can be a bipolar world or unipolar world or a multipolar world. Then emergence of superpowers. When did the emergence of superpower come into picture? It is after Second World War. So Second World War is such an historical event that it led to the uh, invention, it led to the creation of so many things in the world that we live in. So it led to the creation of UNO. It led to the this concept of Cold War and rivalry between USA and USSR, and also the emergence of the concept of superpowers, and also the concept of polarity, like is it a bipolar world or a multipolar world or a unipolar world, and how the hegemony or the anarchy in the international space will change, has changed over a period. So this also, it led to the development or the establishment of regional organizations, international organizations, or monetary relief organizations, which helped these third world countries to confine them into a larger group, or to help them go with the superpowers. So this world has rapidly changed after Second World War. This is like a breaking point. So it's either, if you're talking about the world, it has to be before Second World War and after Second. Okay. So USA and USSR emerged as a Eurocentric world. Emerged when the Eurocentric world. Till then, it was the European colonies, European colonizations that was fruitfully evolving, or their economic activities were greater when compared to the USA or USSR present in all over the world. So with the war, destruction, and with loss of human life, and their rumbling economy, and this they lost their control over these colonies, and also the income or the economy was disturbed. So the Second World War, this Eurocentric world affected very largely. This gave to the rise of uh, okay, for you, this will be America. So America and USA and USSR. Okay. So post Cold War, USA emerged as a superpower until 1949. So there is also a timeline. Then why we'll talk about in the next coming slides. So it USA emerged as a superpower. So until 1949, it was unipolar world. And why? Why? Because this Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombing brought shock to the world, where USA could establish its authority, its interventionist policy, its aggregate interventionist policies in all over the world. So any country was shook, and it was scared to confront USA. So why? Because they thought the USA's bombings on Japan is a reply to the Pearl Harbor by the Japan in the US soil. So, but even though during Second World War, as no war happened other than the Pearl Harbor on American soil, this rigorous decision by the USA led to the world, it shook the world very. It's like, even if you are going to confront them, then you will be shook. So even after Pearl Harbor, it emerged more strongly. The France occupied for 4 years, and USSR was a target of German invention. Then also America showed technological inventions advancement till 1953. See, till 1949, it was the unipolar world, but it continued till 1953. It showed its technological advancements. So France was literally occupied for 4 years, and the USSR target was a target of German invasion. So in this, uh, where other countries are engaged, the USA emerged as a superpower, strong power. So this Marshall Plan, USA came up with this plan where it can help. So Marshall Plan says it is a Marshall Plan where 1947 uh, it is to help Europe recover from post World War destruction, and also America projected its influence in the Europe through an organization called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Okay, so but emergence of Soviet Union as a superpower, we have to understand how did Soviet Union rose to the status of superpower because this USSR it established its communist regime in the East European nations like Poland and which were under Nazi control. So the after the World War, the Soviets army also or the population was reduced 20 million times and its production of steel was literally cut into half. So in the lieu of this, Soviet Union expanded its territory into Baltic countries, Prussia, Ukraine, South Sakhalin, and Kuril. Kuril Islands are occupied, and there has been a tension between Japan and Russia. We have read it in the first decolonization chapter. Then, communist revolution in China also led to the strong contending status with Soviet Union, where this party signed an agreement which that it's going to be a communist regime till 20 years. So it invested, Soviet started to invest in technology, like science and technology, nuclear power, etc. So with this investment, lots of funding, this Soviet Union led to the 1949, led to its first nuclear power nuclear bombing testing happened. So, with the test of nuclear bomb for the first time by the Soviet Union in 1949, this led to the emergence of USSR as a second superpower in competition to USA. So the countries scammed with Soviet are Bulgaria 1946, Poland 1947, and Czechoslovakia, East Germany in 1948, China 1949, South Korea 1950, Vietnam War 1954, Afghanistan 1978, and Cambodia 1979. You can remember these names and also the years because this will help you understand how did the Cold War emerge, how did all these events conglomerated led to the emergence of Cold War. So superpowers led to the mass production of nuclear powers and escalated tensions in the world. So what did these superpowers do? They said that these productions must be stopped and this escalated tensions in the world. So led to the mass production of nuclear powers. This now the only agenda of this superpower is to now the only agenda of superpower is to accumulate wealth, then the production of nuclear powers, and these in a way escalated tensions in the world because these superpowers are at race to get nuclear weapons. So what they all know what happened with Japan. So they were all scared that if this happening in a race, they might try using it at any point of time in little or very smaller disturbances also. So now let us understand what is Cold War. So Cold War, as an interestingly, could be traced back to Russian Revolution of 1917. So we shall understand why. So if you sit down to understand why, so initially Russian Revolution of 1917 was the revolution happened especially because this in an opposition to this capitalist system of uh, economy or capitalist ideology where the socialist government, Russian socialists, they emerged in opposition to the capitalistic system. So this ideology has been in tension since 1917 Russian Revolution itself. But with Germany, when Germany attacked the USSR by violating its non-aggression pact in 1939, then Soviet Union took into its hands and joined this allied powers to fight against the Axis power. See, the fourth point, USSR itself joined allied powers, but even after joining the Allied powers or fighting along with the USA, this USA and the European powers were still suspecting Russia. They were not trusting it. Example, if you've been confronted by a person of your the other group friend will come to you and be start being very nice to you, so you would definitely start getting these doubts like, oh, what is going to happen, why is he doing like this? So in that way, this uh, so this Berlin crisis, Russia joined Allied powers to crush Axis powers. But still, USA did not trust Russia. Sorry, then Soviet Union. If I keep saying Russia, I'm sorry, it's USSR until as we are in Cold War phase. So USSR, but it had no option than to join the Allied forces because in order to attack Germany and stop its expansion in occupying the territory of USSR. So this led to some of the events that came in the picture. This first one is Berlin crisis, and the next one is Korean crisis. Why? Because USA did not. It always suspected Russia. So after a while, they started this race among themselves that we shall oppose this communist capitalist rising in the east, and USA was scared for this socialist rising in the east for them. So they were fighting but there was no real confrontation. So Berlin crisis happened in 1948. Remember this year and timeline. You have to remember the timeline in Cold War. Then it's a cakewalk if you remember the timeline and Cold War phase, post Cold War phase, detente period. So it's literally a cakewalk. So Berlin crisis, USSR stopped Western expansion in USA by blockading the Berlin borders and raising Iron Curtains. So it was termed Iron Curtain. It was Berlin East, Berlin West, and there's a wall been constructed. That's why we talk about fall of Berlin Wall in 1890, uh, 1989, because this led to the unification of Germany in with the collapse of USSR, Soviet Union. So Berlin crisis, USSR stopped Western expansion, and USA, Russia, USA, Britain, France. These three are one group, one alliance, and this three of one alliance is stopped by USSR as a single alliance. So then he avoided of USA. He avoided direct confrontation with Russia because as now Russia is also a nuclear power. So now direct confrontation might lead to war or war-like situations. So he avoided direct confrontation, but he supplied aid to Western Germany in order to fight against the Russian invasion. Excuse me. And what is Cold War? This Cold War term, you might have understood by now. This cold example, why are you being cold to me? It's like being ruthless or being angry but not aggressive. So this Cold War is coined by Bernard Baruch. You have to remember this word, and it refers to intense hostility and tension, war-like situations. Okay, and this Cold War led to bipolar world because two superpowers emerged, USA and USSR, East and the West blocks, and the world was divided into Eastern blocks and the Western blocks. And the later part of the 70s, NAM, the third world or the third neutral uh, organization or third neutral organizations of neutral countries have come into picture. But till then, it was the superpowers, USA and USSR. So who coined the term Cold War word? Bernard Baruch. You have to remember this word. And William T. Fox was superpower, so don't get confused. Then NATO was expanded to Greece and Germany in 1952 and West Germany in 1955. Why? Because to stop the expansion of communist regime in these countries. So in counter to NATO, this Warsaw Pact by Russia. or USSR was established. It's a counterpart of NATO. So this Warsaw Pact was by USSR to counter NATO. Remember this word. Now let us talk about Korean crisis. You all know the 38th parallel line issue. If not, let us talk about it now. So the Korean crisis happened in the Korean Peninsula. So the Korean Peninsula, North Korea, South Korea, where it's divided by the tension of no man's land of 38th parallel line. That was the ceasefire line that was drew by uh, the Security Council of UN. So this Soviet occupied the north of the 30th parallel, that's called as North Korea, and the USA occupied the 30th parallel south, that is South Korea. And Security Council took action. See, Security Council was never in picture all these years, but all of a sudden it could take firm decisions. If you sit to understand why, because during the veto voting, this five veto countries has to sit down and vote, but the Soviet Union representative was not present to veto it. So that's why the remaining four nations have come together and vetoed that the ceasefire should be uh, there should be a ceasefire in the Korean Peninsula. So that's why the ceasefire led to 38th parallel line, and this was supported by 16 countries. And it's literally an American operation, right? If we think deeply, it's an American operation with the Security Council as an uh, authority, which USA says that it has given US America an authority by Security Council to ceasefire the Korean Peninsula and make 38th parallel line. So I hope you are following this. So North Koreans were successful earlier, but this Korean War, the USSR uh, side was successful. So this was a drawback. This was a backlash to the USA, and truce was signed in 1953 with the 38th parallel line as a border, as a ceasefire area. So now let us talk about phases of Cold War. So what are these phases of Cold War? There are four phases to Cold War. Cold War is not just an event that's like stretched over long period of time, but it's stretched over long period of time with varying degrees and varying tensions over certain periods. So this growing mistrust and intensification of conflict started in 1946 to 53 after the Second World War, and in between Russia started to accumulate its nuclear power status, and it started expanding in East European regions with its communist regime. So this period is of like mistrust. They were not trusting each other, although Soviet Union went with allied forces. The America still did not trust it. So that's mistrust and intensification of conflict. It's like, what are they going to do? Because there are no norms, they could act at any time, at no given point of time. Then relaxation of Cold War and detente. So this led to little relaxation, but detente period kept intact the Cold War phase. And now the third is new Cold War in 1979. This started with the invasion of Afghan, because till then they were under pacts of non-aggression. But 1979 with this war, it again brewed the Cold War, and this is called as New Cold War to avoid the misrepresenting representing the Cold War phase. So then fourth one is end of Cold War. Of course, they say Cold War has ended, but the first Cold War has ended. There's always phase of post-Cold War era was where the multiple states have come into play, and the multiple conflicts with multiple ideological differences have come into play. Here we are talking about only two ideological states with different capitalist and socialist perspectives. So these two nations, two different ideologies coming along or having this warlike tensions among them with uh, support from the other states. But these two ideological differences only play the crucial role. But after the post-Cold War, the scenario totally changes. So let us understand what is growing mistrust and intensification of conflict during 1946 and 53. Remember this one. This is an important answer. This write down phases of Cold War. Then you have to write all these things. You have to explain what is Cold War definition and what led to the Cold War, the breaking point, then phases of Cold War. So with spread of communism in East, America wanted to contain it, of course. Yeah, it was scared that this communist regime would take over the world. Okay. So with spread of communism in the East, America wanted to contain it and it confronted Russia indirectly. It did not confront directly. We read it in the previous slide. So why? So in order to not to confront Russia directly, it created two policies. So first one is Doctrine and second one is Marshall Plan. So this is indirect confrontation of Russia where it was helping or where it was making alliances with the third other countries. Okay, other European countries. So Truman Doctrine, 1947. This gave USA enormous powers to intervene to check the spread of communism. So on the eve on the note of spreading communism, on the note of stopping the spread of communism, USA was enormously intervening the sovereign states. So it kind of become an hegemony. Okay, it is a sole power. It was acting as an uh, highest entity in the world, where it was acting like a king. I hope you understand the Hobbes theory, the absolute authority, absolute monarchy. So it was acting like that, where the Truman Doctrine 1947 says USA can intervene and check the spread of communism. So this doctrine, in a way, it gave it USA the options or the loophole to look into or peep into your sovereign nations. So the next one is Marshall Plan 1951. This is, we have read, this is recovery program for Europe after the World War. It was helping Europe to construct the destruction caused by the war and post-war fatalities, post-war uh, economic losses. So both superpowers in this phase avoided direct confrontation because they were scared. What if war erupts? So they were basically wanting to avoid these expenses so that they can shift over or transfer these expenses in establishing arms or in getting standing military or uh, in improving scientific and technological innovations. So they don't want war at any point. So Soviets sent troops to East Germany in 1953, Hungary in 1956, and Czechoslovakia in 1968 and Afghanistan in 1979. So Soviet sent troops where it wanted to establish this communist regime. So USA, it's not just the Soviet Union that was expanding, but on the other hand, USA, it actually overthrew or it actually demolished the left-wing government in Guatemala in 1954 and the invasion of Cuba 1961. It was unsuccessful. So this led to uh, this this caused the USA a lot of bad name or what do we call this word? Uh, I don't remember this word. I'll talk about it later. So, this unsuccessful invasion of Cuba in 1961. What happened was the Fidel Castro's regime overthrew a regime which was favorable to USA, and USA with around 1,500 ex Cubans or something exiles, it wanted to attack the borders or make them invade. So in a way, USA did not like the Fidel Castro's regime because they were favorable with the Soviets. And this thawing out in Cold War, this phase, this word called thawing out, is referable to this invasion, Cuban invasion. Okay, you have to remember this. And it's also called Bay of Pigs invasion. There are three different words coming here. Please remember, thawing out is concept related to Cold War in Cuban invasion, and also thawing out we have read. Then Bay of Pigs invasion. So this two words are important if we are talking about Cold War and Cuban invasion. And also this Nixon, uh, yeah, so USA invaded Dominican Republic 1965 and Grenada in 1983, and unsuccessful and the longest one is Vietnam War. So if you're someone who is not a political science student, or who is not um, what do we call a normal citizen, you would definitely understand why there was a lot of backlash in USA. If there's a backlash about any war, it's the first war would be referred to Vietnam War, where USA lost enormously, and it lost a lot of manpower, and its economy was rubbled, and it led to the uh, demotivation in the American perspective. So, this long and unsuccessful war of 1964-75 to prevent communism in Vietnam from bringing South Vietnam under its rule was unsuccessful. Whereas USA uh, overthrew Guatemala, etc., Cuba, Republican Grenada, and the Vietnam. Soviet supplied its armed munitions over there. So imagine it was investing a lot of things in arms race. So it was diverting its full finances and the money, the income that was coming through the steel production, oil, and the economy was transferred to put on to collecting arms. Improve or making new nuclear weapons, those technology and investments were done in uh, making this scientific transfer of, or hiring the scientists to work specially for making nuclear weapons. So this you have to please remember this, where Soviet Union supplied armed munitions. We'll talk about this in the end. So there's another second phase which is called relaxation of Cold War and detention period. So 1960 crisis of Cuban after installation of communist power, USA wanted to topple the government. But similarly, USSR sent arms for the protection of Cuba, especially the nuclear weapons, because of the aggressive policy that was followed by the USA. So, in Verge, as it is near to the USA border, if nuclear warfare happens, the countries that gonna lose, in spite of winning, would be America. So, USA backed off, and Soviet also withdrew missiles, and the Cuban tension was settled. That we call it Bay of Pigs invasion. Remember this word. And this Bay of Pigs invasion led to the proliferation of many nuclear treaties. The world then seriously understood that if two superpowers are fighting, then how uh, silly is it for the third world countries to interfere and ask them to stop? Would they be going to stop? No, right? They are superpowers. So now world understood that how powerful the nuclear weapons are, how they can mold it or change it, this nuclear power or nuclear weapons, according if some smaller state is not accepting or listening to their policies, or didn't want this American or USSR invasion. So this countries would be at fear that these superpowers can use this nuclear weapons at any time. So this led to the treaty called PTBT, Partial Test Ban Treaty, where this partial trust ban treaty came into existence in 1963. This was put forward to control test of nuclear weapons. So, why this treaty came into existence is in order to stop testing of nuclear weapons, or in order to control the testing of nuclear weapons, because nuclear weapons have come into existence since 1949. Both the nations have started to uh, arms race going on. So they thought, let us put a control, or let us put a ban or let us make only certain number of weapons could be tested. So that treaty of PTBT came into existence in 1963. And second one is ban of use of space for nuclear testing in 1967. Yes, this is generally we are reading. So they banned this use of nuclear testing in space because these countries might use space as a testing to do their nuclear weapon testing, and that would cause havoc in the environment, and it would havoc the human rights of the peoples. So, meanwhile, Latin America was declared as a nuclear test-free zone because it was this area must not be used to test their nuclear weapons, and also agreement for prohibiting there was an agreement for prohibiting undersea. See, agreements are made for not using space as nuclear testing, seabed as nuclear testing, and also it stopped for the prohibition of use of biological weapons. So these are all signed in 1971. So now what we have learned, PTBT, Partial Test Ban Treaty, was signed. Then it banned use of nuclear weapons in space, banned the use of nuclear weapons in ocean bed, and also ban the use of biological weapons. So when did it came relaxation of Cold War and detente period? And also SALT 1, 1972. And this is an interim arms control, and SALT 2 in 1978. This kind of decreased Cold War tensions. Okay, rise of detente period. Let us understand. 1969-78, the rise of detente started. The will to resolve differences and disputes by force, threats, and rattling at conferences. Meaning of detente: the will to resolve differences, disputes by force, threats, and rattling at the conferences, not on soil. This is just fighting or debating in conferences they made, and this must be stopped. You should stop using this. Let us not, back off your army from this place, etc. This was happening especially at third party conferences. Okay. So, symbol of trust and ability to consider each other legitimate interest. They thought it's high time that you should trust me, I should trust you, and we should consider our legitimate interest, and let us not get into this race of distrust, because those two are at it was creating enormous burden on the superpowers in this race for arms. So this detente is thawing out of Cold War, and it was during Nixon and General Ford from USA, and from USSR is Leonid Brezhnev from Soviet. So they met when Nixon visited to China in 1972. This Helsinki Pact was signed. So what is this Helsinki Pact? Is New Cold War of 1979. Helsinki Pact is nothing but this focused on military, political, and it gave opportunities for trade, commerce, and scientific transfer of technology. This scientific transfer of technology could be nuclear technology also. So this scientific transfer of technology could be nuclear transfer of technology. This detente period was debated by Henry Kissinger. He says that there is a limitation to any theory. So there is a limitation to any concept. He says this detente period also there's a limitation. How far can you expect the two countries to be at making having peaceful coordination? Okay, this is just a limited time. Eventually, they will break out and they will fight a war. So Henry Kissinger says this detente period is limited, and Helsinki Pact was signed. Conference happened in 1975. So This new Cold War started in 1979. Why? There's the breaking point for new Cold War of 1979 is in 1979, Soviet installed a power in Afghanistan. So this is backed by communist uh, regime. But USA wanted Soviet Union not to have this expansion in Middle Eastern states. So now what happened? USA with the help of Taliban's opposed this government backed by Soviet Union. Hope you are understanding. So this Taliban's are who religious fundamentalists. So they are just religious fundamentalists. So if we talk about Taliban's of now, how would they have the technology transfer and such of the economic way where they're getting this economy or the money to buy those huge weapons and machinery is it is banned by sorry it is opposed it is supported by religious fundamentalists. The USA supported these religious fundamentalists. So this era it led to the transfer of funding. A lot of funding happened, technology transfer happened just to oppose USSR regime backed regime in in Afghanistan. So this led to the rebirth of new Cold War. So this Cold War started again. The detente period, as predicted by Henry Kissinger, it was just limited, and one event, not even an European event, it was Middle Eastern event of Afghanistan led it for two countries to break this detente phase and start aggression again, which we call New Cold War of 1979. Then Poland martial law was imposed in 1971, which led to pro-democracy unrest. So the Poland wanted the democracy to be installed rather than the communist regime. And this all led for the breaking point. USSR shot down. For any event, there's a breaking point, right? So here, the breaking point is USSR shot down South Korean civilian who is alleged to be a spy. So, of course, he could be a spy, he could be a civilian. So, USSR, just so that USSR shot down a civilian, this was used an opportunity by USA to launch its intermediate range missile, which was stalling in Europe. Understood the politics. So USA launched its intermediate range missile in Europe and Soviet cut talks with America. That's why the detente phase ended and the new Cold War phase started. So these are all series of events. If you sit down to tabulate those events and timeline, you will understand when they were having a great cooperation, when they were having this aggressive behavior, when there was having a war-like situations. Okay. So USA, this invaded Grenada in 1983 and launched uh, Invisible was the Sandinista government in Nicaragua. It also invaded Nicaragua and established their government, which is supportive of USA. And also, it pushed for the development of strategic defense initiative. This is called Star Wars. So, conflicts outside of the Europe gained significance during this period. So, this period, 1979, as Afghanistan is a Middle Eastern. So events not just related to the Europe, but also events outside of the Europe led or played their part in making the aggression start between USA and USSR. So end of Cold War. Main reason is decline of Soviet Union, economy of Soviet Union. So disintegration of USSR or Soviet Union led to the establishment of Republic Russia. So hope you know this disintegration of Soviet Union in 1991. So in 1995, Michael Gorbachev, he along with Allied states, uh, said that the Soviet allied states started to abandon the communist ideologies, and this led to the economic problems. And they started they stopped sending aid and either through military or economic aid as because by then the USSR economy was struggling. So they stopped sending aids to the satellite nations. So as they stopped sending aid, this Hungary and Poland, they wanted to get rid of this communist regime, and they entered free market policies, the capitalist, because of growing globalization events and the post-Washington consensus. So this made Hungary and Poland open up their borders and go with free market policies rather than going for a socialistic policies. So, perestroika is called restructuring of economic and political system, and glasnost is called greater openness and individual freedom. So, these two are events of the conferences done by the Russia under the head of Gorbachev. So, these events led for the downfall or the end of Cold War, where Russia was struggling to keep up its economy and the post-war or post uh, it funded its economy too much in arms race. So this led for these two conferences, Perestroika and Glasnost. Please remember, it's called restructuring of economic and political system, and Glasnost is greater openness and individual freedom. So globalization led USA transfer the market system, uh, the labor was turned to services, and services were reorganized to heavy industries and switched to computers. So it turned this market system and transferred it used this turmoil to benefit itself. With the globalization and opening of borders, USA played its part, and uh, already existing structures made it easy to make use of situations very quickly. So Soviet could not do it because it was overspending on arms. So the previous slide I said, remember, the Soviet supplied armed ammunition. So it was supplying more than what it was be able to produce or able to uphold. Okay, it was taking a lot of burden in making such things. And 1989, Soviet Union abandoned 9 years war in Afghanistan because it was unable to send military aid, unable to control the rumbling economy at the soil. So it stopped sending military aid to satellite states. So this led to fall of Berlin in 1989. So what happened is this wall collapsed and the reunion of families happened, and the German unification happened, where in 1990 October Germany was united, and 1991 with disintegration of Soviet Union, this Warsaw Pact was also dissolved, and communist regime came to an end ever since the October Revolution of 1917, the Russian Revolution, the event which the Cold War phase or the tensions growing between America and USSR started, it ended with this October Revolution coming to an end in 1991. So what happened? Soviet broke into 15 republics, and 1991 it was officially recognized by the head Gorbachev that Russia, Soviet Union went bankrupt, and it recognized the collapse of these 15 republics. Now let us talk about result of Cold War. So what is result of Cold War? It resulted in what happened after the Cold War. That is what we are talking about, result of Cold War. So what happened is it led to the nuclear weapons, increase in arms race, and there's a usual tensions happening or warlike situations. There was no peace. As Machiavelli says, the prince must have a peaceful environment. There was no peace. It was at constant war. Everybody's mind was constantly running. So alliances like NATO, Warsaw, Seato, Cento, ANZUS was formed. So Seato is the Southeast Asian Treaty Organizations. So this was, and Cento is Central Treaty organization. And this center was initially Baghdad Pact, and it was made the Iraq was pulled out, and it was made Cento Pact. Okay, then Seato, the emerging Southeast Asian countries. Pakistan is also part of it. Pakistan, Thailand, Philippines, USA, New Zealand, Australia. So these are all formed to over come to stop the invasion of communist regime. So their own agenda, sole agenda is only that. Then result what happened? UN now become ineffective. Why? We have read about United Nations organizations in the previous class. So why and all you will be getting it from there. So also new independent nations like African Union, which were decolonized, those countries, those unions, and Latin America, they kept their distance from superpowers. And also this third allied countries NAM was formed, non-aligned movement. And in a world there was prevailing poverty, health crisis, and over expenditure due to arms race. It was prevailing like a um, kind of, although there were growing technological inventions, but it was kind of quoting this darker picture, the grayish picture, not darker but the grayish picture, where it's part good, part bad. So it disturbed the peace of world. Exactly. Then post-Cold War. What do we understand by post-Cold War? It's a phase from December 31 to 1991 and until September 11, 2001. So second one is again started from 9/11 with Twin Tower plane crash until now. Until now, this is new phase, new era. Welcome to the new Cold War era. So first phase where post disintegration of Soviet Union in 1991 and until 2001, the USA was a dominant power. And the second phase, this is 9/11 until now, the China, Europe also came into picture. Okay, then implications of post-Cold War. Though there are certain implications of post-Cold War, rise of unipolarity, uh, North-South conflict, Asia-Pacific as new subsystem, MNCs, United Nations, then clash of civilizations, then emergence of new Cold War. So rise of unipolarity, we know the USA was having this status of superpower. So invasion of Kuwait by Iraq in 1990 and Gulf crisis led USA exercise its power dominance, and in a way it extended its umbrella to Central and Eastern Europe through NATO, which is termed as a partnership for peace. So unipolar world. USA was expanding its arm. Then European Union. Europe was unioned because of demolition of Berlin Wall and this expansion of Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Hungary, Slovenia, Czech Republic in 2007, and Bulgaria and Romania in 2009. So this all led for the unification of Germany. Like it formed as an European Union. Then North-South conflict. North-South conflict led to the fragmentation and marginalization and also this various organizations have come into picture. IMF, WTO, World Bank, and structural adjustment policies. Then Asia Pacific as a new subsystem. So this where this organizations have come into picture with emerging economies, and APEC country which had the emerging the tigers, the Eastern Tigers, USA, Japan, China, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, they were all part of the emerging economy or rapid growth. The MNCs held their arms, extended their arms due to the clout formed by World Trade Organizations. The MNCs peak into the sovereign states have increased rapidly. Then United Nations its veto power is reduced. It became a puppet organization with specially what do we call its funding by superpowers. This mostly uh, the collective action taken by US. United Nations is mostly in favor of US. Then extension of NPT nuclear non-proliferation treaty in spite of opposition from third world. So they kept on expanding it, not signing it. Then Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington in his book Clash of Civilization. Please do remember this one. So these conflicts of future of this age will be purely cultural and fault lines rather than the military or the ideology. Okay, this clash is not so much over Jesus Christ, but on unequal power. The culture is an expression of conflict. He says culture is an expression of conflict and religious fundamentalism as state policy is a matter of concern for the world. I hope this line you understand it. It's very in depth. You have to read in between the lines. So non-aligned movement, NAM became irrelevant because it had no role to play in the third world countries. How much soever they could combine to bring pressure on the superpowers to get done this NPT 1995, they were just existing as a just a name organization, no real power. Then emergence of new Cold War went on. The new Cold War, it was mentioned by Edward Lucas. So this new Cold War is recent Russia and Ukraine is a proxy state for America. So because America's only aim is to defeat Russia, no matter if it's Soviet Union or Russia, so it's gonna have to thinking to cut its tentacle anytime. So it is more complex and broader as it involves wider nations because of rise of multilateralism. And this also due to these initiatives like Belt Road, BRICS, then Greater Eurasia, and it lacks ideological power because there are more than multiple ideological nations at picture, not just two ideologies like Cold War. So weakening of West started because America wanted to take it slow because especially uh, the 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 revolt at the state or the soil land, it wanted not to expand its presence in the third world because it was causing a huge burden on its economy. Then multipolarization, eastward movement of economic and political shift. It not just it's going towards the east or going toward the west. It's been spreading out all through the world. So polarization is all over the world. So it was very difficult to which region or which block that could be managed of. So then China, the emerging dragon, this dragon global emergence, it being a second largest economy, led for this new Cold War. And the purchasing power, what is its relative economic wealth is what? It exceeded to that of ranking of G7 economies. Like this statement itself is tells you the economy rising of China, excuse me. So the rebalancing strategy by America got failed because TPP Trans-Pacific Partnership and One Belt One was overthrown by One Belt One Road and Asia Pacific Free Trade Areas AIAB, uh, Asian Infrastructure Bank, and BRICS New Development Banks Act East Asia Policy Make in India. These are all overthrowing the World Bank at the center, which follows monetary policies of USA. So increasing competition between USA and China. Uh, uh, 1 second, sir.